Welcome to She Blaze, where we're bringing you cannabis culture from a woman's point of view. And as always, here to elevate the cannabis industry. I'm one of your hosts, Ice Dawson, Cannabis Socialite.
And I am Dasheeda Dawson, the WeedHead.
Hi, sis. Hey, sis.
Hey, sis. Ooh. Your sound.
Hey, sis. On mute. Shout out to the internet life. On today's episode of She Blaze, the Los Angeles Safety Commissioner wants cookies out. An African president encourages cannabis agriculture. And we ask the big question: are licensing, lotteries, and caps bad for business?
The answer is yes. But before we get to that, let's of course jump into our high of the week. And I'm so excited. My high of the week has really got me a little giddy because it came on Mother's Day and it is beautiful, y'all. This is the Chill, the world's coolest hit. It's a premium vacuum insulated smoking apparatus, or a bong. And of course, you can get $20 off with our promo code, THEWEEDHEAD. But I have been using the Chill since Mother's Day. I want to shout out them for sending this to me because I love it. I love it, first of all, because it's beautiful, right? And it comes in all different types of colors, hot pink, there's a stainless steel. But there is also so much information that comes on its amazing box. It really made me feel like a kid in the candy store opening up this kind of a big deal. But the Chill has a double wall vacuum. It's a food grade stainless steel. It's just an amazing product and I'm excited to be using it. So after some time, I will absolutely give a full on review, but that's my high of the week because it came from Mother's Day, like perfect timing. And it has been an amazing high utilizing it as well.
Oh, yes. And it's so cute. It comes in a bunch of different colors too. So that's exciting. And make sure you guys use that promo code WEEHEAD, the WEEHEAD. And so my high of the week is pretty joyous too. We won another Communicator award. Super excited. We won 3 and we got our gold in Get Your Civic Life. So shout out to us and Imani for putting that on and getting another win. I'm really happy.
Congratulations. I mean, for us all, but definitely for you. This is your baby and your brainchild. So not just one Communicator award, but 1, 2, 3 Communicator awards. That's just amazing because last year we won our first one. And this year we came back and swept all the categories that we submitted, and definitely excited when we got the gold for our collabo with Imani. And it was your idea, Get Your Civic Life, and teaching people about how they can get involved. And that ultimately has been what I think we do best with She Blaze, is get everybody the true tea so that they can decide how they want to move forward as it pertains to cannabis. Is all the news. And I know you got a bunch for us. So of course, let's get started with that topic.
Get into the cannabis tea because it is hot. And so we are heading over to Los Angeles to talk about cookies it's really crazy to me because during the Public Safety Commission meeting, they were allowing public comment. And so a sheriff out of the Los Angeles department really expressed his dislike for the cookies dispensary being in Melrose. Okay, surprise, not. And he feels like they need to move out of there. And a commissioner agreed. He said, it'd be in everyone's best interest if they relocated. Now, this is being reported that they are having people illegally parked. People are consuming cannabis in the area. And, it's an overall disturbance for the neighborhood. And I guess they're not happy that Cookies security only covers the dispensary and they're not top flight and, harassing everybody once they leave the premises. So it's getting a little tricky. It's in West Hollywood and it's a temporary license, you guys. So they may not be able to receive their permanent license to stay in that location.
This just sounds like some mess to me. As always, we're the ones targeted. So, I am in the Office of Community and Civic Life, and it definitely includes some community safety aspects of community and civic life. And yeah, we in our office get a lot of complaints around cannabis. And sometimes we get complaints that have nothing to do with the cannabis owners at all. Sometimes it's about just the neighborhood. But it doesn't surprise me that there's a bit of canophobia, even in a place like California where it's been legalized for 25 years. It also doesn't surprise me that this particular brand, I actually would be surprised if it was more of one of the Cali brands that is deemed acceptable for mainstream, where it maybe looks like a Apple store, right? And it's a little bit more of a drier experience. I'm not sure. But what I know from the cookie stores that I've been in, they're colorful. They're meant to stand out on the inside and the outside. And so that in of itself is an attraction, right? But also their founder, Berner, is well known in the industry. He's one of the few BIPOC owners in the industry. And he's also, obviously built his own brand outside of that. And I feel like there's a little bit of celebrity drawing in folks to the spot as well.
Yes, you hit the nail on the head. For cookies in particular, it is something where people of color, when they visit Los Angeles, that's one of the first places they want to go. So it feels like, since the demographic tends to be people of color and for the culture, Melrose is just not having it. Because is it a disturbance when people are waiting outside for the Ellen show? Because they wrap around like blocks down from their studios near that area. So, for me, it feels like, are they targeting a certain demographic when they say that it's a disturbance? And to be truthful, when it comes to California, even though they have like no smoking in public laws, everyone's smoking in public.
Ain't that the truth? And let's be honest, I think if it's a parking lot and it's not owned by the facility doesn't have any legal right to even tell people to move on if that's not what they're choosing to do. But this is also how I feel about clubs in certain neighborhoods, especially if they're in like the strip mall type of areas where police then sit in the parking lot to over police people of color. And in this case, it sounds a lot like that same narrative. And so, yeah, if it's a question of should they move out, the answer is no. They should push back, and they should absolutely call out the discriminatory practices that are happening. Because to your point, there are other things that happen in Melrose that shut down that area. But when it's Hollywood, right, then it becomes a different standard. I think it's sad, actually, right. Because it's almost like you want to co-opt the culture, but you don't want to actually include the culture. It's too much.
Yes, and being that Cookies is one of a few multi-state operators that tends to have the culture in mind, I definitely think we got to stand up for it, because this is not a permanent license, and that means that they could revoke it at any time. So I do think that people have to stand up and make sure that they can't just pull it out just because. So, sad to hear that about Cookies. And Cookies has been in a lot of drama lately outside of Los Angeles. They had their own drama in Oregon, and it was a mess. But, according to the internet, everything got solved. So if that's the case, we definitely have to stand up for our culture.
Absolutely. And I think the complaints are the things that you're just like parking illegally. Like that's when you're just being extra, in my opinion. Just like that's the type of stuff that is just like, that's what you're complaining about. You could see if folks was really causing a disturbance, and that's just not it. But I think it's interesting that they're now potentially at a chance that they could get denied a permanent license. I would absolutely fight that, because I think it's discriminatory in its intent.
Okay. And so, we will tell you guys more about that just in case they try to, do something on the sneaky linky, like they try to do a lot, and get into our next hot topic number 2. And it is international, baby. So Africa has a country called Malawi, and they are looking to use cannabis agriculture as a new form of revenue. And their president now is on the record letting everyone know, hey, we need to start looking into producing cannabis as our main crop.
It's great to hear because there are a lot of climates within Africa that would grow hemp or marijuana, but grow cannabis in general well. And yeah, I think it's interesting when we see countries outside of the United States as they're starting to take a stance on where they need to be for cannabis. And I'm glad to see African countries are starting to be more vocal about it. We know last year, early in the year, Ghana passed medical cannabis. I think the year before that, South Africa, Zimbabwe. And so there's a movement happening, certainly. And I'm excited with the things that we're doing with the cannabis health equity movement, because we are also in conversations with African countries, small and large, that are looking at changing over their crops, right? And going from things like tobacco to hemp, to cannabis, in order for them to, really see a better future for their country's revenue and overall ecosystem.
I'm glad you said that because, one of the leading crops in Malawi is tobacco. And the president is like, every year the revenue declines. No one wants tobacco anymore, especially as cannabis becomes more available. And that, if they want to be able to keep up their revenue, they're definitely going to have to do like Zimbabwe and do cannabis agriculture. And Zimbabwe has really cool laws and stuff because they do not restrict based on land. Mm-hmm. And we know here in America, that's a big deal, the type of restrictions and opt-out different locations can do. And it could be the reason why you actually don't have cannabis agriculture.
Yes, I mean, Zimbabwe is actually very nuanced because a lot of the countries that are in South America and Africa, they are definitely focused on government-led initiatives or partnerships with government in order for, which we call public-private partnerships, in order for cannabis to be rolled out. Several countries are just interested in one producer. And I think, there's an opportunity to do a hybrid. And I don't want to say that Canada is the model because they made so many mistakes, but the fact of the matter is the government is still the lowest price point, lower even than the illegal market, and that's what it should be. Now, whether or not it's good cannabis, that depends on who you're talking to and what you're interested in, but I will say that there's an opportunity for government level. There's also an opportunity for a private sector level, and of different stratifications from small to big. And I think that people have to think about the cannabis ecosystem in that way. And I think Zimbabwe is doing that because they're allowing people to come in and wholly own cannabis companies without having to have a partnership with the government where the government gets a cut of it. Now, the government will still get its cut because it's taxes nonetheless. But the way that other countries and the way that Malawi may be thinking about it is it's going to be a government-run entity and you are a private partner and maybe consultant where you're not owning it, but you do have a long-standing contract to deliver on it.
Well, that is a good way to look at it. And it's a great segue as we talk about the government really being the first movers on cannabis businesses. Because hot topic number 2 is the government in America wants to do even more of like moving forward of cannabis federal legalization. And so there's been a new bill that was introduced by the Republicans lawmakers, believe it or not, out in Ohio and from Arkansas. And this is the Common Sense Cannabis Reform for Veterans, Small Businesses, and Medical Professionals Act. What a mouthful, but it's really empty because there were a lot of things missing. And so we got to get into it because I'm like, where have they been?
You are hilarious, but the tea is real. The shade is even realer. You said what a mouthful, but it's really empty. But that's fact. They're saying a lot, and they're using a ton of buzzwords. The buzzwords being veterans, small business, and medical, right? Medical professionals. And those three groups certainly need a place to be carved out for them in the cannabis space. But surely, in all that we have learned in the last 10 years of adult use legalization, 25 years of medical legalization, and the last year of our realization that this shit is a little crazy for us in America, especially Black, Indigenous, and Latinx people, and cannabis is participating in that, we now know that it's bigger than this. The government has systemically chosen to use cannabis as a tool for racism, racially biased enforcement of various harms to our communities. I mean, whether it's you're talking about arrest, incarceration, job loss, housing, you're talking about families destroyed. And that has happened over the course of the last 80 years. Every area of the government's decision to transition this to a legal market must be centered in that thought process, that history, and that accountability. And this is not it. And so a lot of people ask me whether or not I supported it. Am I excited? And all I can say is, it looks good because we finally have some bipartisan support for legalization. Let's be clear. It has not been the Republicans bringing forth bills in the past. It's been the Democrats, right? And it has primarily been Republicans focused on hemp because that's what Mitch McConnell has been focused on. And as the majority leader, that is where everybody was kind of falling under. So this is the first time we're seeing that. But at the state level, we see bipartisan leadership bringing forth bills. We see that all the time. So we know that it's a bipartisan issue. And at the state level, we see the focus on equity and more interest in some of the social justice components of it. This only takes a sliver of that. And even that, I will say, it falls short from really recognizing the government's role. It's saying common sense cannabis reform, but the common sense cannabis reform is to undo where you did the most harm. And this isn't it.
Well, we know common sense is not that common, and it obviously can't be from Ohio and Arkansas because somebody please give me the revenue from their cannabis industry right now that is medical marijuana, because last I checked, ding, 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 they're not leading us in medical marijuana programs in the country. So how do they think they're going to put a common sense bill when their state doesn't have the common sense to run their medical program correctly? So I would not trust that. I'm not really trusting people that don't have a real program putting a real cannabis bill together that is meaty. And like you said, it does have the bare minimum, which is descheduling cannabis and removing it from the Controlled Substance Act and allowing for interstate transportation and interstate export and imports. And ultimately, it would be ran under the Food and Drug Administration as well as the Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau. And that goes in the Treasury Department. Interesting enough, since how is this supposed to be for medical professionals if the first thing you put it under is the Treasury Department? You get what I'm saying? So their common sense is not even adding up in their own bill.
What else do we have?
Well, we have that it will open up for them to conduct more studies on a federal level with medical marijuana. And there's not much because the bill's not much. The bill is, fluff.
It is. And, people like to say, well, it's just what was introduced and there's going to be all this stuff that happens down the line. But what I will say is that it's a step backwards because the state by state level, we are seeing legalization centered in equity and in medicine. And New York is definitely right now leading the way, having just passed what I would say is the most progressive equity centered legalization bill in the country. But the point is for us to continue to top stop ourselves. That's not enough. It isn't enough. It's the new minimum. Okay. And so when I look at bills being introduced, if you're really caring about the greater good and undoing the harms, and some of the quotes when I read the articles that were about it were all about co-opting messaging that cannabis equity advocates have been using for years and co-opting it for the purpose of this bill. Yes, do I think veteran small businesses and medical professionals need better support in the cannabis industry? Absolutely. God forbid you happen to be Black and brown and fall into any of those categories. You're now getting even the least amount of support. But these are still some of the more privileged areas, even still within some of these communities, because you're getting benefits as a veteran. It's a small business, as an entrepreneur, you actually own a business. And as a medical professional, you actually have a profession that allows you to be indispensable, even in times of crisis like a pandemic. So we're talking about beyond that, there are communities that have been harmed. And this bill does nothing to even address it. There's no equity designation. There's no interest in using cannabis tax revenue in an appropriate way to reinvest into the communities that were harmed. There's none of the bare minimum. And so I'm very eager to see what the new MORE Act will be when it comes out. We're expecting it to drop this month. Senator Schumer has been teasing us, even joined us in New York City for the parade. But at the end of the day, he's been clear. He's not interested in passing the Safe Banking Act, or I don't think something like this, because it doesn't do what it's supposed to do and repair and undo the harm. That's what we need.
Yes, it doesn't do what it of course it doesn't. I mean, look who is putting it out there, last I checked, I don't know too many people from their party in Ohio pushing for real medical marijuana use. I'm sorry. So as far as I'm concerned, there is no common sense. And plus the actual bill is contradicting itself and saying that, it wants cannabis to be regulated the way they regulate alcohol. Why are we highlighting medical professionals, even veterans that we know use this for medicinal uses, if we are trying to regulate it like alcohol? I don't know too many medical professionals that's regulating alcohol or prescribing alcohol to people for symptoms. So again, I'm unimpressed. This is what you're doing with our tax dollars. You could have did something else because this wasn't necessary. You could just support the act that we want to bring to the floor, that they're actually asking real advocates and real people that are working real programs actively in like real legal states. How to create a bill that really benefits people. So another bill gone, another tax dollar wasted, as far as I'm concerned.
Can I just say, before we move on to our main topic, I just want to say that I need the cannabis industry to get a grip. Whenever we get new news around federal movement in any way, shape, or form, we get a lot of people celebrating before really looking at the details. There's very little to celebrate in this, because it is taking us backwards from where we've made movement on a state by state level, and we don't want that. And to your point, it's also taking us backwards on what we know. We're talking about regulated like alcohol, but yet we are at the same time, in the same breath, talking about medical professionals. You're absolutely right about that. So I just want us to just, again, slow our roll on the celebration, scrutinize everything, and recognize that while it's okay, and we do want bipartisan, like, this is a plan that's good for everybody. It don't matter what your affiliation is, but have the decency to acknowledge and take accountability for what the government has done and utilize this opportunity to fix that.
I know that's right. So we'll see. More to come. They have better things to worry about than this. We got this. That's not what we need, though. And we could get into our main topic, because after a bill being put on the floor like this, I really needed us to ask a big question, especially with so many lawsuits coming to flow, more states coming online. We have to talk about it. It is the biggest elephant in the room outside of social justice and civil rights. And that is lottery caps, lottery and lottery and I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought, you guys.
Lottery and licensing
And
caps.
yes,
Yes.
lottery and license. I mean, it doesn't make sense. I lost my train of thought, but yes, it's huge because we see this time after time again, and we have to take it to Illinois first because I mean the drama is real. And it's even more real because we were able to see how they scored for their lottery picks. And so, Dasheeda, I'll let you take it away.
I mean, first, let's just talk about what we're talking about. So, when we are going through the licensing process, there are choices as a regulator on how you will do that. You can do it with a cap in mind, saying you won't have more than this many licenses. In New York, there are no more than 10 licenses allowed in the old statute. There were no caps put in the current statute. It's up to the Office of Cannabis Control or the Cannabis Control Board and the Office of Cannabis Management will decide that. But other places, they've put in no caps, like Oregon have no cap, and at the end of the day, I feel like what we've seen is a slow, in some cases fast, deterioration of utilizing these as successful ways to start a market. Let's talk first about caps, because I do think that people don't understand that by creating a cap, even when you think it's a lot, 75 in the case of Illinois was the cap on licenses for equity licensing in particular, even when it sounds like a lot, because compared to 10 in New York, 3 licenses available in Minnesota, it sounds like a hell of a lot. However, it turns out that, guess what? There's still a lot more people that deserve an opportunity in the market and can thrive in the market without this false competition that gets created when you put in caps. And so Illinois started off wrong by simply saying, hey, we're only going to have 75 of these licenses. Okay. Whenever you do that, you immediately put people as competition against each other, as opposed to looking at a license application and saying, do you have all of the requirements necessary to be licensed or no? And if it's a no, it's just done. It's not about, oh, it's a no because we only had one more slot and it came down to these 10 things or 10 entities. It's to me, it's odd to see us do this because it is about creating a false have and have nots. And in some ways it is kind of blown back into the face of the industry. So that's one of the things I just want to talk about with caps. When we talk about, did you want to add something, Ice?
No, I had just like total brain fog. Sorry.
But when we talk about the lottery, now we're talking about taking something else that can feel a little bit out of control of the would-be operator. Mind you, you put in hundreds of thousands of dollars you've invested in, you haven't even gotten a license. And now you're being told that you may have a chance based on being pulled from a lottery. And in the case of the lottery, right, it allows people to be entered based on, again, did they have the requirements? Did they have a score or no? And if they did, then they get put into a pool that they will pick from that pool the licenses. We watch the lottery with the NBA picks. There's so many places where lotteries come into play, and it is really something that is a lot of risk because you don't know where you're going to land. You don't know if you're going to get pulled or picked, but it allows the regulators to say, well, it wasn't us. The lottery picked that. The lottery
right, but the lottery even based off of? Are they just random numbers that's rotating on balls? We're pulling out, oh, application 45, you got it. Like, is that what the lottery is? How are they picking it?
That is essentially where the lottery part of it starts. First part is the scoring and saying, do you even make it to the lottery? And that, again, I use analogies that are everyday analogies so people can understand it. And so since we just had NFL draft, we have NBA has a lottery. There's so many other places that you can think about it. But going into the NBA draft, for example, we know where people's picks are, but we also know relatively who the best players are in the country. And they kind of have a ranking going too. It's a loose ranking. And then, now we got these online rankings. Those things all factor into some of the, whether you are even going to be eligible in that lottery. And if you're not in the top 25 or 50 players, then yeah, you're probably not getting to be a lottery pick for the NBA. It's the same in the cannabis space. So in some ways they've created where you have to get a certain score. After getting that score, if there's more people that scored than there are available licenses, back to the caps, then there will be a lottery to determine who gets those licenses. And that lottery is all about picking those people who we've deemed the haves, meaning the regulator said, okay, they have everything they need. They have the score that they need. But now,
well, a lot of times we don't know what they're even using as their scoring metric, really. Like, we don't know how they're doing these. So it's a blind lottery.
It's supposed to be, but what we found is that we do not have that blindness in this industry. So in Illinois, the real tea is that the people that they use, the KPMG accounting firm that was hired to score the dispensary applications, they actually wound up being somehow implicated in some of the applications that they were meant to score. So that's a huge conflict of interest and never should have happened. The industry in Illinois has been really, I think, traumatized as a result of it. First of all, people are still waiting now over a year later for what the decision is on licensing. Over 250 applicants actually did get disqualified from the process, and nearly 1,000 applicant groups tried to qualify for vet bonus points. They had a very complicated scoring system, in fact, as you start to break it down in some of the articles that we read, and more recently, because it's a public record, those scores came out. And one, you can see how many big companies actually thought that they was going to qualify as social equity applicants. That's a real problem. So we got to talk about what we call the slave master clause that's in the Illinois bill, right? We have to talk about the fact that you don't have to actually be, part of this disadvantaged group. You just have to also have them be a manager or employee. And yeah, when that list came out, I was like shocked. I couldn't believe some of these brands thought that they were actually meant to be equity applications. But yeah, go ahead. We've seen a mess happen in Illinois, and we try to unravel it.
I mean, it's a mess happening in Illinois, but you guys, Illinois is not the only state. Yes. This is happening in a lot of cannabis markets, especially markets that are coming online that are closer further from the West Coast. We tend to see this a lot on the East Coast as well, but we're also seeing it in tourist areas, and what we're seeing is lawsuits. Okay, lawsuits. And the one thing lawsuits do is stop any cannabis market in its tracks. And so, there was a lawsuit in Nevada in 2019. And if you guys don't know, when Nevada came online in 2018, it was already a medical marijuana state. So, there's the usher in the ones before, but everyone thinks, hey, this is like the perfect time to get back in because they're opening it up again. Well, Nevada got into a huge lawsuit where 11 different businesses ended up suing the Department of Taxation because of the licensing process.
Absolutely. I mean, and they had every right to. In fact, each market responds differently. In the Illinois market, you have people within the legacy market choosing saying, hey, this is an equity. We're boycotting the market. They are in front of big multi-state operating, retailers saying, no, don't shop here. In Nevada, you had the businesses come together in a suit that is saying this is all sketchy. Nevada also lost its entire regulatory office, right? Because they found that it was actually sketchy. And then they have now been, a new, fresh group that's supposed to also investigate some of the things of the past. But the damage is done. And the market that exists right now is really as a result of, shady deals. And we've got to call it out. And part of it is hidden behind these lotteries, to your point, and hidden behind the caps that they put in these licensing arenas. So it's hard. I am in a world where we have no licensing caps, but we still have a lot of people complain about our city, licensing process. And, I think it's way better than a lot of other places, but I do see how there's still some levels of enforcement always embedded in the thought of licensing versus, I don't know, I just feel a little bit differently when we go get our driver's license. You have a lot more at stake when you put somebody behind the wheel of a motor vehicle. It's like your life, the people's lives, everybody's life. When we're talking about being able to grow a little bitty plant, and yet all of this energy. Meanwhile, with a DMV, everybody is either you passed your licensing and you got all of the requirements or you didn't. There's no cap on how many people can get a driver's license. It's actually something as an adult or as an adult who has a child, you look forward to doing with your child. It's like their transition. And yet we do so much for the cannabis plant, one that I think really should be up to our discretion on how we use. It seems incongruent. There's also equity missing in, the thought process. The DMV doesn't open if it doesn't have a way for wheelchair access or hearing impaired testing. It cannot even open in some jurisdictions. I know in the city of Portland, that is required. You have to have different languages in order for this to be deemed accessible to everybody. And yet we did not do that with the cannabis space. It's a frustration.
Yes, you're right. There are so many elements that go into the DMV that we never even look at. But I feel like there's a part of me that every market wants, when it's adult use, especially because we're seeing this in medical marijuana, but we're also seeing this a lot in adult use. When it's adult use, the first thing they want to compare it to is alcohol. And it's like, okay, well, adult use, if it is alcohol, I know packaging stores on every single block, at least one in every county. The difference between a packaging store, a bar, and the actual warehouse where people are distributing the alcohol that they get. So there's a part of me that feels like anybody, like almost everybody can work in alcohol. Almost everyone can access it and find it easily, especially in the states that have adult use cannabis. So why are we still trying to sweep it as that, but like create the horrible, it feels like just a roller coaster hamster wheel ride of being able to have a cannabis business that has to be licensed by the state?
You're absolutely right. And also shout out to Edie because she's right as well. Sometimes we're putting in caps because we're trying to circumvent multi-state operators coming in and being able to buy up everything very quickly and basically be unbeatable or too big to deal with. And I think New York is working on the thought that there are no caps yet, but you can't buy more than these types of licenses together. You can't buy, I use the right term, but you can't get into the industry with more than these licenses to prevent some of that growth of the multi-state operators. But they're sneaky businesses. Most of the multi-state operators are really like conglomerates of, 12, 13, 15 different entities. And, they do tend to also prey on smaller entities in other areas that once it's gotten to the point where they're ready to get out of the industry and they've, exhausted all of their funds. Now a bigger company could come in and be like a captain, save a whole little bit and be like, we got you, but we got your equity too. And I think that that's where I'm really struggling because we do need other mechanisms besides caps to deal with that. I look at Oklahoma because they have no caps, and out of nowhere they had 9,500 licenses, like almost 1,000 licenses within a 12, 13 month period. Partly because it's only $2,500 to get a license, but also the proof or the burden of getting a license or showing you have what you need isn't very high. It's a low barrier of entry. And as a result, even though it's Oklahoma, it's still actually, that probably is one of the more diverse markets I have seen because of that low barrier. And I think that that's where I got to look at the results versus what people are saying will happen. There's a lot of economists that believe we need market determinants like a cap. But that's
No, because when I
they
go
don't pay
out to
attention to the
the
legacy market.
they're not paying attention to the legacy market, but they're not paying attention to any market. Because listen, I could go to Total Wine and get some exotical wines I've never heard of from different parts of the area, or I could go to my local liquor store where I know I could get me a pint for $8.99. You know what I'm saying? So there is the element of like people. Consumers are still going to shop. Consumers are still going to look to go. Like, yes, there are big MSOs, and if there are multiple different tiers, then it's a lot easier to get into it. Maybe we should stop scaring people into caps and licensing as much as we should be like really scaring people into tiers. Like, we need to have a tier system, because as far as I'm concerned, yeah, the big MSO, they can't get that equity, and they can't get no tax leniency either, right? Like, they have to be able to pay that vertical license tax fee for having that big old multi-state operating. And we put in all these other type of taxes, but everyone's scared to put in a multi-state operating tax.
That's true. I mean, you know what? We were just talking about this with a few MSOs coming into New York, and they're getting tax breaks already based on how they've purchased land in preparation for work that they're going to do in New York, or they think they're going to do in New York, as a result of adult use legalizing. They are maneuvering in a way that is similar to what big pharma, big tobacco, or big alcohol would do if they were in this industry. That's also why I'm not that pressed about federal legalization, because all this is going to do is open it up to them, and then we talk about a whole different type of shark and a whole different type of issue. But yes, I feel like we need a tiered taxation system, and it clearly is that those who have the privilege of being able to stack in this way, they absolutely have the burden of holding up a good portion of the revenue that's generated within it. But I do want to just say, even in those cases, we're still talking about relatively small businesses compared to these big old pharma, tobacco businesses. So some ways you don't want the MSOs to be completely handicapped, because they're the best defense against some of those big companies too. And I think that they don't recognize it too. And so I am constantly imploring them to say, y'all better get with the legacy market.
With their asses. How many Google alerts you get about a MSO that's in maybe 2 states, all of a sudden merge with the company one we ain't never heard of, and we have to go through like forensic files to figure out who the parent company is. Like, I don't know.
You're right. I mean, there's some that's merging, but then there's some that also recognizes that they're already in it. So they know they're not making as much money as they thought they would. Why? Because nobody wants dry, cultureless weed. Let's be real. And the fact of the matter is, a lot of MSOs, that's where they're starting. For the culture has to be integrated. The legacy market has to be integrated. And honestly, that is the best chance for big MSOs to survive out big pharma, big CPG, big tobacco, because big CPG already knows how to advertise for the culture. It's already integrated. You got people like Bossima St. John coming in real quick as a CMO, putting Black Girl Magic on everything and letting people understand how you're supposed to market. We haven't had a lot of that happen in the cannabis space yet, but it's best going to happen if you start to see more of the MSOs kind of more embracing the legacy market rather than what they've been doing, which is trying to get it be more enforcement against it, or acting like it doesn't exist at all and that they just poof created a market. No, you didn't. There's no way that we would even be talking about this if it wasn't a $4 billion market unregulated in New York, for example.
Hello. And meanwhile, we know half of y'all stuff falling off the truck. So y'all need to shut the heck up, okay? Because the results are the results, and they are finding that a lot of this stuff is leading back to these companies that have so many parts, they don't know what's going on this side of the state, okay, cushy punch. So, and ultimately, again, this just hurts the cannabis industry, because when lawsuits happen, the judge usually is like, nope, y'all done. Whatever y'all given, awarded to, it is what it is. We have to figure out this court ruling before we allow you guys to continue to give out license to cannabis businesses, where we saw that in New Jersey, we've seen it in Nevada, we've seen it in Arizona. You know, we're seeing it in these different states that are coming online that all have a lottery and cap system. So it is hurting the business. It's hurting our pockets. It's hurting our revenue. It's hurting the market, the consumers, the patients. Because a lot of times, you know, it's the patients and the consumers that miss out on these opportunities when the market is stalled by, you know, lawsuits that are deserved.
You're absolutely right. And I think that that's something we got to kind of remind ourselves that when we are New Jersey, for example, was making some strides at expansion, but in 2019 got completely shut down from that expansion. Only at the time, 10 licenses. I think now they have 11 or 12. It's still not enough. It's not enough for the full state of New Jersey. They did double the amount of dispensaries or alternative treatment centers from 6 to 12. And so, but that's still not enough. I mean, again, that's all people thinking that, oh, well, we covering our bases because they're not taking accountability of the legacy market, and that economy is real. But I do think at the end of the day, if you wanted to be part of the legal market in New Jersey, you are going to suffer from a lack of product diversity, strain and cultivar diversity. I mean, I was having a long conversation with a PhD who was doing a project where he was literally trying to put together all of the different strains and was shocked to hear about some of the strains that I was using from the West Coast. And I was like, like there's way more than what you're seeing in the New Jersey ecosystem. The limitation of cultivation limits the amount of different strains and product diversity. And that is in and of itself the disservice to the patient or the consumer. We should be able to get better, safer, diverse products, and we should be able to buy them from better, diverse entrepreneurs and businesses. It's like not the businesses that are doing shady in one hand, and we hear those stories, and then on the right hand saying or co-opting our messaging around cannabis equity.
Okay, drop the mic. Because we are not here for it. So ultimately, you guys, especially people just getting into the industry, the first thing when you're getting in as an advocate and they're talking about bills, acts, moving things forward, do not let them trick you into thinking it's easy to go back and just release more licenses and you know, these lottery picks later, right? Don't let them trick you into that. Just go ahead and say from the start, no, none of that, no license caps. And if the lottery system is going to have to be really built out before we give it.
100%. But I also think we can't just sometimes say no without offering up solutions. So if you are someone who has a background in strategy, political strategy, but strategy in general, corporate strategy and structures, you may be able to work. And it's sometimes about offering that up. A lot of the work that I've done has been like, hey, I think this is a way to solve this Rubik's Cube. And so I've been offering that in the city of Portland. But I do think it does equity starts with having an open market. There's no reason that the market should be closed and limited other than fear that it's going to be overrun, and I think that still comes from racially biased fear. Overrun by who? That goes back to why they want to shut down the cookies in the West Hollywood location, because it's about the clientele, and that we see in every aspect of the cannabis industry. And I rebuke that for this. I think we could do a lot better with our businesses. We can also save a lot of money on people for people and the risks that they take sitting and waiting. And yes, you may have a backlog. It's one thing to be waiting for your line in a queue. It's like getting on a good roller coaster. You seeing everybody going up and down, and you seeing the line is getting shorter and shorter. It gets you more excited because at least you know your time is near, as opposed to standing on this line and then at some point it isn't clear when they're going to run out of seats for the roller coaster. And you've been standing on the line watching everybody go, holding tight, missing out on all the other rides because you think you're going to be able to get on this one. That's what that's what lotteries do, in my opinion. It's a false hope that's provided. It's a false competition that is forced into the market, and it isn't necessarily good for business. And I kind of feel like we need to take a little bit more of other lessons out of the ag world. We don't got too many caps on lettuce production.
Lettuce, I just said alcohol. Like what there? I mean, we could take it from the DMV. We how many examples? It's like why we got to keep bringing solutions for lawmakers to do their own jobs. Don't we pay y'all to do this job? So I'm just like real confused. But I feel like we had to just say it straight up. No more, no more. And we know there's 1,000,010 solutions. So y'all go and do y'all jobs and find them damn solutions, because that is not a solution. That is a hindrance to progress.
Sounding off like a real zillennial. And I get that. I mean, at the end of the day, we are paying tax dollars and people are not doing their job. So also vote. If they're not willing to listen and you provide a solution, then the next step is absolutely that's not the person that's in the right position.
Okay.
Ultimately.
Well, I know that's right. Well, thank you guys for joining us on another episode of She Belays. We have made it to the end, and I am super excited. And I'm super excited to get the rest of my weekend started. It's later on in the evening than we normally do She Blaze. So thank you guys for tuning in.
Yes, I mean, and I got to shout out Senator James Sanders Jr., who kept us in the morning as he's trying to educate folks in New York on entrepreneur opportunities and expungement as far as the New York bill is concerned. We'll be actually next week with the Majority Leader Crystal People-Stokes at our regular She Blaze time. So next week we'll be starting a little bit late again then. The work is never done. That's really what it comes down to. The work is never done. And New York is like, as God is my witness, I cannot have New York be another Illinois, and no shade to Illinois, because I know the folks there are working very hard to fix the issue. And I say folks inside the government and on the street. But yeah, our biggest lesson is to avoid that. So we got to be on top of who we put in charge in the New York market. It got to be somebody who understands equity, and it has to be someone who has probably worked and supported to do the work over the last few years as well. And we also got to be clear about bringing ourselves to the table with the right mindset. So thank you always, Ice, for getting our minds right.
Shout out to our lawmakers for doing their job in New York, okay? Because I think that needs to be said. They did their job, right?
Yes.
They came in and they did their job. Just to be out, just so we're clear, they didn't want another Illinois, so they did their job.
Yes.
They found a solution.
Attempted. But now the next job is the hardest job. It's the implementation. And, shout out to the Cannabis Regulators of Color Coalition. We learn a lot across the country about what we struggle with implementation post legalization, because sometimes the laws, they have our hands tied behind our back, but other times they don't. But we have partners or colleagues in other agencies that make it difficult. Do not sleep on the implementation. We still got to be just as active and continue to advocate.
Yes. No licenses, no caps, no licenses. So thank you guys for joining us.
You can find me. Oh yeah, I forgot. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Dasheeda Dawson. Hey, and of course THEWEEDHEAD.com with the rest of the company. Ice, thank you. This was a very good episode with a lot of good details.
Yes.
So I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna take my chill and
the
rest of the evening.
Yeah, right. All right, you guys. Make sure you follow She Blaze and listen to us anytime. Audible, Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Music. So find us.
Yes. All right, Ice. I'll see you next week.